Amen. So at this point, there's another special guest. Some of y'all may not recognize it, but I recognize it. But I want Senator Nelson to come and just kind of tell us what's going on in this service today. Okay.
Thank you. Well, Grace and I thank you again for your warm hands of friendship. You always make it so special for us. And I keep noting how this church is growing. I notice you put a roof over the drummer. He must be so good you've enclosed him. You've enclosed him in glass and you put a roof over his head. I just want you to know what a special relationship that Grace and I have, not only with you, but with your pastor. I want you to know how far this goes back, because in the year 2000, when I was running, President Clinton had come to Tampa to campaign for me, and we had a big luncheon in Tampa, and your pastor, our pastor, was invited to come and to pray over us at that luncheon. And we've had this relationship ever since. As you know, I've had your pastor up to pray over the United States Senate. And he's an extraordinary person. You know, educated as an electrical engineer at UCF, and he started voluntarily pastoring and also working at the old Martin Marietta, now Lockheed Martin, and then in the early 90s took up the Lord's work full time, and it's been ever since. And Grace and I we've been blessed to be a part of his family and your family all these years. Now, I want to introduce you to another special friend. You'll recall I've brought a couple here. My neighbor, I brought one day. He's the NFL Hall of Famer, defensive tackle of the Seattle Seahawks, University of Miami National Championship team, Cortez Kennedy. And Cortez, of course, makes me look like a midget. But back in 2007, the pastor was kind enough on a Saturday morning to have me come here and do a joint town hall meeting with Senator Barack Obama. And you know what happened to him. And so now I want to introduce you to another brother. This is, let me just tell you this pedigree. Growing up with loving parents, he ends up as this hulking tight end at Stanford University in California, applies for a Rhodes Scholarship, one of the most distinguished scholarships in all the world, at Oxford, England, is a Rhodes Scholar, comes back and goes to Yale Law School, and with that pedigree, he could have gone into any silk stocking law firm anywhere in the country, but instead, he comes back to the neighborhood in a very corrupt and very dilapidated town, Trenton, New Jersey, in his native New Jersey. And then he gets elected to the city council. He takes on the corrupt political machine that has been running it for 3 decades. And they slap him down. But he gets back up. And in 4 years, he's elected the mayor. He cleans up that city. And then in a special election, he's elected my brother in the United States Senate, Senator Cory Booker. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Pastor.
Good morning, church. It is good to be in the house of the Lord. I just want to say how I feel like you all love me a lot because I walked in here with a lot of security. I had the sheriff with me. I felt very safe. And Lord has blessed him because he married up. He married up to a woman that might know a little bit more about security, protection, public safety than he does. And the wisdom of this community was to send her to Congress with me. And I feel blessed because she and I are both members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Now, I felt very blessed when I got to Washington to be the only senator member of the Congressional Black Caucus and sit there with legends, people like John Lewis. And the Congressional Black Caucus has been known as the conscience of the Senate, of the whole Congress. And it's a time that we, especially now, as the Congresswoman and I were talking, need a conscience in Washington. I want to say that I feel God's grace all the time, but this visit, I feel lucky to have Bill's grace, his incredible wife and First Lady. Thank you very much to see Senator Bill Nelson's wife, Grace Nelson. I want to let you all know that your pastor has a reputation that goes far beyond the historic community of Eatonville, far beyond Florida. Clearly, he is someone that is qualified, certified, and divinely sanctified by the Lord. And I want to thank him very much. I do come here with a heavy heart. I am one of those folks that know we have work to do. I am the 21st American ever to go from being a mayor of a big city straight to being a United States Senator. And I live in a community in my neighborhood. I've never left that community I moved to as a law student, where I lived in some high-rise public housing projects. I still live in that same neighborhood. Median income for my community is $14,000 a year per person. And we are a committed community, rich with character. Our children have a wealth of potential. But it is evident to me when I go to Washington, leaving my community, that we still have work to do as a society to be who we say we are, a nation with liberty and justice for all. And when we talk about the Lord's gospel, I remind the people that we have a civic oath that we take all the time too, when we pledge allegiance to the ideals of our country. And so I want you all to know that it is my faith that keeps me strong. That it is my faith that keeps me going, because the lessons I learned as a young boy growing up in a small black church in New Jersey are the lessons that still serve me. And I just want to say to the pastor of this church, there are folks that maybe aren't rooted in faith that sometimes worry when things happen, when bad things happen. They look at the politics of the world and they worry and they wonder. But if you are grounded in the traditions of the church, you don't fall prey to worry and despair. We know what the Bible tells us. The 23rd Psalm, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. But what I learned as a boy was that it's not enough just to be in that valley of the shadow of death. God tells you, yea, though I walk. You see, when bad things happen, it's not a time to curl up. It's not a time to give up. It's not a time to shut up. Yea, though I walk, it's a time to stand up, to speak up, and to keep working your way through. I tell people who keep worrying to me, their hands ringing, look what they did, look what they did. And I'm talking about, it's not about what they're doing. It's about us and what we must do. My father came from a small mountain town in North Carolina, and he used to tell me he was so poor, Pastor, he couldn't afford to be poor. He was just Po, P-O, couldn't afford the other two letters. But it was the love of his community when his mama couldn't take care of him that took him in. It was a church that told him that even though college wasn't in he was going to go to school when he couldn't afford it. It was the church that past collection plates let him afford to enroll in North Carolina Central University and make his life way. And he told me even though he was hardworking, it was a community committed to the principles and ideals and the values of this nation, and in this case, the Christ. And so if I can conclude, I just want to say two things. First and foremost, there is this understanding that we know that we can do all things through Christ. But we also have to remember it says Christ who strengthens us. He doesn't strengthen us to sit there and do nothing. Christ strengthens us to do the work of the Lord. And this is a time that we need that work. We need to understand that we are not powerless. Alice Walker says the most common way people give up their power, most common way people give up their power is not realizing they have it in the first place. And so God tells us that we have the power to shape our outcomes. The last thing I want to say is just a note of gratitude. My father, who was this incredible figure in my life, pastor, on the eve of me being elected, the fourth ever African-American popularly elected to the United States Senate. This man who demonstrated to me, because we all know what James Baldwin says, children are never good at listening to their elders, but they never fail to imitate them. When we model the behavior, when we show that we are not just people of faith, but we are also people of works. My father, 6 days before I was elected, he died. Never got to see me go to the Senate. And I share that with you because we all know that death can end a life, but it can't end a love. And there's an old definition of faith that says when you get to the end of all the light you know, and you're about to step into the darkness of the unknown and uncertainty, that faith is knowing one of two things will happen. Either you'll find solid ground underneath you, or the Lord will send you people who will teach you how to fly. I want you all to know I feel so blessed. I know that it's communities like the one in which I'm standing here now, the struggle, the continuance, the never letting things, no matter how bad they are, shut us down, that have kept fighting over the years. It's communities like that, the reason I'm here. But I want you to know in the Senate, when I got there as a fatherless child, that there was a man who was so important to me. And I came here to Florida at his request because I owe him a debt of friendship. I just want you all to know that a community like this, where I feel at home, and this is my first time here, I look around this room and I see my church. I look around this room and I see my daddy's church in North Carolina. I look around this room and I feel a kinship in Christ. And I don't want to leave here without you all knowing that when I stepped into the darkness of the unknown, there was a man that mentored me in the Senate, who put his arm around me in the Senate, and who, when I come to work every day in Washington, reminded of the communities I represent, communities of disadvantage, communities of struggle, and in many cases, communities of color. I want you to know I have one of the best partners, friends, and mentors there are, and that is Senator Bill Nelson. Thank you very much, Pastor. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. I look forward to you. Thank you.
Amen. Remind you, I just want to say, Sister Nelson, that I want to highlight the fact that the hospitality that you gave me when I came to Washington, D.C., you managed all of that activity, in Assistant Senator Nelson. Thank you so much for all you do. And thank you, Senator Nelson. God bless you.